clue. You're there, you know how to do it. So that's a huge advantage to actors who have been on series.
Jadzia Dax has always been one of the most unforgettable characters in Star Trek. Played by Terry Farrell, she was calm, witty, wise, and powerful all at once. A woman with centuries of memories tucked inside her. Fans loved how she carried herself with confidence, never afraid to challenge anyone, not even Captain Sisko. But behind the scenes, Terry once admitted there were parts of the Star Trek universe she struggled to face, not because of drama, but because of how deeply she connected to Jadzia Dax on a personal level. Her feelings revealed something much more human behind all the makeup, lights, and science fiction. Join us as we take a closer look and uncover what Terry revealed. But first, let's go back to where her journey began. Early life and first steps in Hollywood. Terry Farrell's story begins in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, far from Hollywood lights and space adventures. She grew up like many Midwestern kids, but she always stood out because of her height and her striking looks. That natural presence opened the door to modeling when she was still very young. Terry spent about 18 months working as a model, and even though the jobs were exciting, she knew she wanted something more. She wanted to act. So she started studying acting while still modeling on the side. It was a busy time for her, but she pushed through because she believed she could build a future in front of the camera. That belief paid off faster than she expected. Her first major break came in 1984, when she starred in the short-lived TV series Paper Dolls, playing a model. It wasn't a long show, but it gave her the experience she needed. Soon after, she made her feature film debut in Back to School, acting alongside Rodney Dangerfield and playing the love interest of Keith Gordon's character. This role helped her stand out, and more opportunities followed. In 1986, she appeared in an episode of The Twilight Zone, showing that she was ready to try different genres. By 1989, Terry knew she needed to take her craft seriously. She began studying acting with the legendary Stella Adler, who taught some of the biggest names in film. Around this time, Terry also appeared in well-known series like Quantum Leap and The Cosby Show. Each role gave her more confidence, but she still had not found the one character that felt like hers. That moment was on the way, and it would change her life. But before that happened, she took part in a pilot for a US version of Red Dwarf, playing a character named Kat. The project wasn't picked up, but the timing could not have been better, because a very different role was waiting for her. And that role was about to pull her into the world of Star Trek. Becoming Jadzia Dax on Deep Space Nine? Shortly after the Red Dwarf project ended, Terry was offered something huge, a lead role in Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. She didn't just get a part, she became one of the key figures on an entirely new Star Trek series. Terry was cast as Jadzia Dax, the space station's Starfleet science officer. The character was special from the very beginning. Jadzia was a trill, a species that lives with a long-lived symbiont, almost like sharing your mind with an ancient being. Her symbiont was named Dax, and Jadzia was its 8th host. That meant she had access to centuries of memories from 7 previous lives. Her personality was a blend of her own traits and the experiences of all who came before her. This made her calm, wise, and thoughtful, but also playful and confident. Before joining with Dax, Jadzia earned degrees in exobiology, zoology, astrophysics, and exoarchaeology. So even before the symbiont, she was brilliant. Fans loved this balance of intelligence and kindness, and Terry brought it to life effortlessly. When Deep Space Nine debuted in January 1993, viewers quickly connected with Jadzia. She became close friends with Station Commander Benjamin Sisko, forming one of the show's strongest bonds. Later in the series, she married Worf, the iconic Klingon warrior, showing new sides of her character. Jadzia's journey, however, took an emotional turn when Terry left the show after the 6th season. Paramount decided to kill off her host body, but the Dax symbiont survived. In the next season, Dax returned with a new host, Ezri, played by Nicole DeBoer. Terry's exit changed the show forever, but her version of Dax remained a fan favorite. Yet her time on the series wasn't only shaped by the character, it was shaped by how the character was built behind the scenes. That story adds even more depth to her journey. How Jadzia's look and character were created. When the Deep Space Nine team was choosing its cast, they wanted a mix of species already known in the Star Trek universe. They already planned to include humans, Bajorans, and a changeling. For the next character, they wanted to choose a species that had appeared on Star Trek, The Next Generation. They decided on the Trill, based on a character named Odan, who appeared in the episode The Host. But there was one problem. The makeup used for Odan didn't look right for Terry. Michael Westmore, the makeup artist, tried to make the look more feminine, but the producers still weren't happy. According to the story, after Terry put on the original Trill forehead appliance, executive producer Rick Berman looked at her and said, "What did you do to her head? She used to be beautiful." The team didn't want to change species because they liked the idea of a character who carried centuries of wisdom. They wanted Dax to be the old man who could guide Sisko. So Michael Westmore came up with a new solution. He suggested giving her the same type of spots that Famke Janssen wore when she played a Kryosian in The Perfect Mate. This idea worked, and it became the new standard for all Trill going forward. The look was simple but unique. Lines of dark spots running from the temples down both sides of the head, neck, and body. This new design allowed Terry's natural beauty to show while still giving her a distinct alien identity. With her look finalized, Jadzia Dax became one of the most recognizable characters in the Star Trek universe. The struggle to define Jadzia Dax. When Deep Space Nine first began, the writers had a hard time figuring out who Jadzia Dax was supposed to be. Michael Piller even admitted it openly. He said, "Having a Trill seemed like a really good idea at the time, but it was the most difficult character for us to define. Jadzia Dax escaped us." At first, the writers imagined her as an elegant and almost untouchable figure, someone like Grace Kelly or Audrey Hepburn, beautiful, calm, and ethereal. But that idea wasn't enough. It didn't tell them how she should act every week or how she fit into the crew. By the time the show reached Season 2, Ira Behr stepped in with a new direction. He realized that Jadzia didn't have to be a quiet goddess. She could be bold, clever, and full of life. He pushed the show to make her a smart-talking, wise-cracking tough cookie. This change made a big difference, but Terry Farrell still had her own struggles in the beginning. In a 2014 interview, she said the character was frustrating at first. She remembered being told to play Dax as a mix between Grace Kelly and Yoda, which confused her. One moment she was supposed to be calm and graceful, and the next she needed to act like a centuries-old teacher. Terry also questioned scenes that didn't feel right. One scene showed Dax gossiping about dating on the station, and Terry said, "Why would a 350-year-old person care about who you're going out with?" Her point made sense. A woman carrying 7 past lifetimes probably had bigger things to think about than relationship rumors. Michael Piller later explained why the character felt so unclear. He said that under Dax's calm outside appearance, there were all these various personalities that she's gone through that are in turmoil, and that she carried a lot of inner conflict. In other words, Dax wasn't supposed to be simple. She had many voices inside her, made from all the lives she had lived before. Those layers made her fascinating, but also made her hard to write at first. This early confusion shaped Jadzia's on-screen journey, and before long, the writers would make another major change that turned her into the character fans remember today. The shift that changed everything. As the show continued, Ira Behr and the writing team realized that their first idea for Dax didn't work. She was never meant to be the Spock of the show, even though she shared wisdom and experience. Behr explained it clearly. He said, "We changed Dax in year 2. Originally, she was going to be the wise old owl, the wise old man. And then we realized that she could be the one who's ready to go out and kick anyone's butt, and go out and have an adventure and have fun, and be kind of witty and mercurial." Once the writers discovered this version of her personality, they committed to it completely. This is when Jadzia became lively, confident, funny, and brave. She could be gentle in one scene and bold in the next, and Terry Farrell played that combination with ease. Terry herself explained how challenging it was in the early days. She said, "It was a character who had lived 7 lifetimes, been a man and a woman." Imagine being only 28 years old and being asked to carry the emotions of a 350-year-old being. She felt nervous walking into the studio because she expected the producers to tell her exactly how the character worked. Instead, she discovered they weren't sure themselves. Terry said the team wanted her to look 28, but act hundreds of years older, which wasn't easy. She worked hard to adjust to what they wanted. But even then, the writers were still trying to understand Dax. Michael Piller eventually made a decision that helped shape both Terry and the character. He wrote that Dax was trying to come to terms with all the memories and emotions inside her. This gave Terry something real to hold on to. She explained that this helped her assimilate the job and allowed her to feel unsure on screen, which worked because Jadzia was figuring things out too. Terry said it made her feel lost and uncomfortable at times, but that worked for Dax, who was also balancing many identities. As the seasons went on, Terry became more confident. She said that by the time they made her more roguish in seasons 2 and 3, she felt much more at ease with the dialogue, the cast, and the action scenes. Working closely with Michael Dorn, who played Worf, also helped her find her place. She said she had her own voice by then. Terry later said she wanted Jadzia to be remembered as wisely mischievous, a perfect mix of her intelligence and playful charm. And as the writers expanded Dax's story, they discovered new directions, but not all ideas made it to air. Some were rejected long before filming, which shaped her character in ways viewers may not have realized. The story ideas that never happened. Behind every episode of Deep Space Nine were dozens of ideas that never made it to the screen. When Terry Farrell announced she was leaving the show and the producers decided to kill off Jadzia's host body, Michael Piller suggested acknowledging her death in the Star Trek Insurrection movie. He wanted a few small lines showing how deeply Worf was affected by losing Jadzia. But Rick Berman rejected that idea because he felt it would confuse movie audiences who didn't follow the show. So the moment never appeared, even though it would have added emotional weight for dedicated fans. Another idea was pitched early in the series by writer Michael McGreevy. He suggested a love story between Jadzia and Dr. Bashir. In his story, the Dax symbiont becomes ill, forcing Bashir to separate it from Jadzia to save both of their lives. During the separation, viewers would see Jadzia's personality alone, without the influence of Dax. In this version, Bashir would fall in love with Jadzia herself, not the joined being. Jadzia would feel something back, but she would know that her biggest responsibility was to be joined with Dax again. When Bashir realized the only way to save the symbiont was to put it back inside her, he would choose her life, and Dax's life, over his own feelings. McGreevy said it was a simple love story, but the writers chose not to use it. These rejected ideas show how many different directions the character could have taken, but every choice pushed her toward the more adventurous, confident figure fans grew to love. And understanding those choices helps explain why Dax's joined nature played such a big role in shaping every episode she appeared in. Understanding Jadzia's joined nature. Jadzia Dax's entire identity is built on the idea of being a joined trill. Jadzia refers to the young woman who serves as the host. Dax refers to the long-lived symbiont living inside her abdomen. Together, they form one shared mind. Jadzia's family name was never revealed on the show, though some novels call her Jadzia Dax. At the start of the series, Jadzia is 28 years old, but Dax is nearly 300. Before Jadzia, the Dax symbiont lived in 7 other hosts: Layla, Tobin, Emily, Audred, Tarius, Joran, and Curzon. Because of this, Dax is technically the oldest crewmate on Deep Space Nine, but carrying 7 lifetimes of memories doesn't always feel like a blessing. Many episodes deal with Jadzia's struggle to balance her own thoughts with the memories and emotions from past hosts. In the episode Dax, Curzon Dax is accused of murder. This forces the question, should Jadzia be punished for something done by a previous host? The legal debate becomes intense, and the case is only resolved when evidence proves Curzon was innocent. Later, in Invasive Procedures, an unjoined trill named Varad becomes desperate because he was rejected from becoming a host. He tries to steal the Dax symbiont, believing joining will fix his life. He even manages to remove the symbiont from Jadzia and partially join with it before being stopped. Another episode, Playing God, shows Jadzia training a young trill who wants to become a host. This episode reveals more about her own training under Curzon and how serious the joining process is in Trill society. Jadzia's most painful discovery happens in Equilibrium, when she begins to have disturbing mental problems. On Trill, she learns that the Dax symbiont once lived inside a man named Joran Belar, who was mentally unstable and committed murder. Those memories were hidden from her, but once she confronts them, her mind becomes stable again. Later, in Facets, Jadzia meets each of Dax's previous hosts through a ritual known as the Rite of Closure. This includes facing Joran once more and deepening her bond with Sisko through the memory of Curzon. Finally, in the episode Rejoined, Jadzia meets Lenara Khan. The 2 symbionts had been married through previous hosts, and the emotions return. But Trill society has a strong taboo against reconnecting with lovers from past lives, making the episode one of the most emotional in the series. The tragic end of Jadzia Dax and the legacy she left behind. Jadzia Dax's story takes a heartbreaking turn in the 6th season finale. Tears of the Prophets. After years of adventure, wisdom, and growth, she finally allowed herself to imagine a future with Worf. The 2 had decided to try for a baby, even though Dr. Bashir doubted it was medically possible. When Jadzia later visited the Bajoran temple, she was full of hope. Major Kira had been praying for her, and Julian brought good news. He told her that the enzyme modification had worked, and that she could become pregnant with Worf's child. It was one of the happiest moments of her life, but it was also the moment that made her death feel even more painful. As the Federation launched an attack on Cardassia, Jadzia stayed on Deep Space Nine for reasons the show never clearly explained. She returned to the temple to thank the prophets for the blessing. That was when Dukat arrived, possessed by a Pa Wraith. He released a surge of deadly energy that struck Jadzia, leaving her mortally wounded. He then opened a sacred orb, allowing the Pa-wraith to enter it. This act closed the wormhole and cut off the Prophet's connection to Bajor. Jadzia was taken to the infirmary, but she died shortly after. Her death broke more than one heart. Sisko felt lost and devastated, blaming himself for everything that had happened. He left the station in despair. Worf suffered deeply too. In Klingon culture, a warrior must die in battle to reach Sto-vo-kor, the Klingon afterlife. Because Jadzia was murdered in the temple and not in combat, Worf believed they would never meet again. He carried that burden heavily. To honor her, he led a dangerous mission against the Dominion, fighting with everything he had so she could earn her place in Sto-vo-kor. Even though Jadzia died, the Dax symbiont lived. It was removed and rushed to Trill, but during the journey, doctors made a quick decision. They implanted Dax into Ezri Tygan, creating Ezri Dax, who became part of the main cast in the final season. Jadzia's death was shocking, but her impact didn't fade. Fans continued to admire her, and critics often placed her high in rankings. Screen Rant listed her among the best Star Trek characters. CBR praised her as one of the fiercest female characters and one of the best Starfleet officers. Sci-Fi even described her as the 12th sexiest Star Trek character. Writer Laura Dale said Jadzia was an early sci-fi trans allegory handled with respect, and many fans agreed that Trill's reflected themes familiar to transgender experiences. But Terry's life didn't stop when she left the show. She took her talent in a new direction, and the next chapter brought her into the world of comedy and family life. But while Terry stepped away from the spotlight for long periods, she later returned for the fan-made project Star Trek, Renegades, taking on a role connected to her past. Her journey shows how much she transformed both her own life and the world of Star Trek, a transformation that all began with Jadzia Dax. Terry has always been honest about how deeply the role shaped her, and in later interviews, she opened up even more about what those early days truly felt like. Entering Deep Space Nine under pressure. When Terry Farrell first walked into the world of Deep Space Nine, she was not calm or confident. She said she was a nervous wreck, excited but overwhelmed. The show was already deep into production by the time she auditioned, met the Paramount executives, got the role, went through costume fittings, and did makeup tests. Everything happened fast, and she barely had time to breathe. When she finally stepped onto the ops set, she froze. She remembered looking around and thinking, "This is enormous. This is the biggest set I've ever been on." That sense of scale made her even more nervous. On top of that, she was the last actor hired, which meant they had filmed almost everything else already. The pressure to catch up was intense. Then came the makeup issue. At first, Jadzia Dax had a forehead appliance, but the producers didn't like how it looked. Terry recalled how Michael Westmore, the makeup supervisor, quickly changed the design. He removed the forehead and replaced it with the famous Trill spots. Because of that change, they had to reshoot her scenes. Terry described it as being thrown in the trenches, and she wished she could go back and do it all again with the knowledge and confidence she has now. She even said she believes she would play Dax far better at age 47 than she did in her 20s. But even with the pressure and the fear, something deeper started forming inside her. And that connection would shape her understanding of Jadzia Dax more than anything else. Discovering the heart of Jadzia Dax. Once she settled into the production, Terry began searching for the core of Jadzia. She wanted to understand who this joined Trill woman truly was. What caught her attention first was Jadzia's strength. Terry said she admired how Jadzia wasn't defensive at all and carried herself with calm confidence. Jadzia always seemed relaxed, stable, and mature, even in dangerous situations. Terry held on to those traits as her guide. She also explained that she didn't reach that level of calmness in her own life until she became a mother later on. But during those early years, playing Jadzia made her feel safe. She said the character became her anchor to feeling safe in the world. While the show itself often had dark and heavy themes, Jadzia stayed hopeful. She wasn't loud about it and didn't force her positivity on anyone. She simply carried a lightness that balanced the tone of the series. Terry believes that came from her own personality. Avery Brooks, who played Benjamin Sisko, used to tell her she was too open, and Terry said that was simply who she was. She naturally had a lot of energy, and she channeled that into Jadzia's optimistic presence. She also let pieces of herself shine through the character, saying Jadzia's constant energy and warmth were reflections of her own personality. But the show also required deeper, darker moments from Jadzia, and those moments were the ones Terry struggled with most in the beginning. Stepping into serious moments and building chemistry. Terry admitted she often felt unsure during the early seasons. She described herself as a fish out of water because she still needed to learn the rhythm of the show, memorize long dialogues, and trust her instincts. When more serious stories appeared, especially the Mirror Universe episodes, she wished she could redo them. She said she didn't quite trust that I was going to be okay, and she felt nervous stepping into such intense material. But she also had episodes that felt magical. One of them was You Are Cordially Invited, the wedding episode between Worf and Jadzia. She remembered director David Livingston being incredibly supportive and said she, Michael Dorn, and the director worked together closely. That collaboration made the episode one of her favorites to film. Another episode she mentioned was Change of Heart, where Worf must choose between saving Jadzia or completing a mission. Terry said she felt deeply connected to the other actors during that storyline, and the emotional weight of the episode stood out to her. These experiences helped her grow more comfortable, and soon she found herself fully immersed in Jadzia's world. But one of the biggest turning points came when the producers decided to pair Jadzia with Worf, something Terry and Michael Dorn had unknowingly encouraged through their off-screen friendship. From on-set friendship to a Star Trek power couple. When the producers told Terry and Michael Dorn that they planned to pair Jadzia and Worf romantically, both actors found it funny. Terry said they had been flirting with each other on purpose, thinking it might give them more scenes together because they were friends. She laughed about how clever they thought they were, but she said once the writers committed to the relationship, everything fell into place very naturally. Their chemistry wasn't forced. It came from their real friendship. Terry said she loved working with Michael Dorn. They could be honest, challenge each other, and talk through scenes with ease. She said she learned a lot from him as a person and as a performer. Their dynamic helped bring depth to one of Deep Space Nine's most beloved relationships. But off-screen, Terry's life changed quickly near the end of her time on the show. When Season 6 ended, her contract ended too. She said she didn't feel like she left the show because she didn't walk away. There simply wasn't a negotiation for another season. What made that time even more intense was how fast everything happened afterward. She said, "I had no break in between. I died one day, and the very next day, I tested for Becker." She went from playing a confident, heroic character to playing someone neurotic and struggling in a sitcom. This transition was difficult for her because she was used to playing a strong figure like Jadzia Dax. But she also said she felt fortunate to experience both types of television. Those years taught her new skills and helped her understand herself better as an actress. And even though the journey was exhausting and emotional, it shaped the legacy she carried with her long after she stepped away from Star Trek. Do you think Jadzia Dax deserved a different ending on Deep Space Nine? Why or why not? And which version of Dax connected with you the most? Jadzia or Ezri? And what made them stand out to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.